once you're free to, be whoever you want to be in the game, it helps you kind of sink into that character.
It's a cool way to be to, yeah, attract those like-minded people.
Something nerdy is gonna happen, and we're gonna make it cool, I think.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talkin' Nerdy on Outside of the Box. And I'm so excited. This has been a goal of mine for a while because anybody that knows me knows that I'm super nerdy. And one of the things that I've loved to nerd out about is the guild in particular. So I have somebody who I think has made an impression on me for a long time, and you've just done some amazing things. Sandeep, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Gosh, happy to be here.
Absolutely. For those that, may not be familiar with you, just kind of give a quick little 1 minute background on yourself just to kind of
How
talk
dare
about
they?
that.
Yeah, you might know me from the Guild, or I also created a show called The Legend of Neil, and those were sort of my two early in my career nerdy exploits that turned into kind of larger than life projects, which was really cool. So the Guild, I did with Felicia Day. I was an actor in that, and that was a blast. And Felicia and I, for those unfamiliar with Felicia, she's an actress and improviser and does a host of amazing nerdy things. She's the queen of the internet, some may say. So she and I, early on in our careers, were both improvisers and met in improv school together, and then just cast each other in our shows. So she created the Guild. I created the show Legend Neil for Comedy Central. It's about a guy gets sucked into Zelda and has to fight his way out. And so that was a really fun, good half dozen years that we created, built both of those shows. And that sort of launched my my acting career. It was since on, a bunch of random shows, Community, Crazy Ones, yeah, what else? I don't know. I don't remember my own IMDb. But and that's been fun, but primarily focused on directing more these days, and I've been streaming a bunch. And then we created a TTRPG show called Desiquest, which is an all South Asian led TTRPG actual play that takes place in an all South Asian mythological universe. So that's been really fun to sort of explore my culture more in the content that I'm creating.
I think that's amazing. And we definitely will talk a lot about that. Just to kind of go back a little bit, because I think I don't, that may not be everybody's story of going out to LA, but I mean, being from New Hampshire and kind of growing up in more of probably a small town environment and then making the big decision to go out to LA. I mean, for you, did you have a lot of reservations, as I'm sure a lot of people do? I mean, I think the success
Sure.
rate of people going out to LA is probably not that high, and you've managed to parlay this into, I think, such a successful career.
Thanks. I think we're doing all right. So yeah, I had a ton of reservations. Well, actually, I wouldn't say reservations. What I did have was B plans, backup plans. Um, and my backup plan, because I was a computer science major in college, and so my backup plan was to just go up to Silicon Valley and if I didn't figure out LA, then I would just go get a job coding up there, and that just never materialized because I think just things started to piece together. I feel like it's a war of attrition out here in LA, and that if you just can weather the storms long enough, you eventually find your people. And when you find your people and your community, then you look out for each other, try to support each other, try to build story together. That's what just drives me every time is collaborating and creating interesting stories that are meaningful to me, and or that tickle me or just ridiculous. And so, especially as I get older now and I have a kid and I've like really firmly established roots out in LA, it really is so much more about the people I surround myself and the community that we're building than it is about, trying to quote unquote make it in LA. Because if the pandemic and these strikes and uh the economy has taught me anything, it's that, there's so much out of our control. There's so much that we can't, um, best laid plans kind of a thing. Like we just can't predict what the world is going to throw at you. That rather than focusing on these like big external, like I want to be a movie star, or I want to be this. Like it's funny, like yeah, sure, I came out here, I wanted to make movies, but like movies barely exist anymore. And I'm still, it's not to say that I'm not still working on movies, but like, man, have they taken a huge hit, right? The film industry has completely changed. Like the people's habits to go to movie theaters is completely upended. And so it's like, yeah, so if you had the specific goal or desire to be this thing or follow in someone else's career path, like you just don't even know if that path exists, or will exist in the 5 or 10 years that you build up the expertise to do it. So it's been yeah, quite a journey, but I'm really happy with where I'm at with my company and with my crew, my people.
Yeah, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and it's speaking of finding your people, as something that I think has always really touched me is seeing the relationship that the folks from the guild all still have with each other. It's something
Yeah.
that feels like so long ago. I mean, I've watched it probably several times at this point. I mean, it's probably one of my favorite things, but to see that series and then see how close you all still are, I think is an amazing, beautiful thing. What do you think has been really key to that?
A couple things. I guess it was all of our firsts in so many ways. Like it was like the first thing that really popped for almost all of us on that show, So I think there's just an element of that where it was like, here's this magical thing that also caught fire and that, thousands upon thousands of people seem to really enjoy. And so I think just being in that experience together sort of forged the bond. But then it's probably a testament to Felicia and Kim and everybody who put that show together to bring, really authentic human beings together. I think like authenticity is like the thing, it just felt like everyone who jumped on board wasn't trying to be like a ladder climbing, type person. It was like they were in it for the right reasons. Maybe by virtue of the fact that it was so low budget too. Like, it's like if you're in there to make a bunch of money, they're like you're totally barking up the wrong tree. So, it was, yeah, I think it was just like confluence of those factors that led to like just us all loving each other. I mean, like also, the Jeff and Felicia and I, we did improv for many years together. So there's already this foundation of this like kind of existing crew, I guess, or, sort of communal mentality between the three of us. And then it was like, Robin and Amy and Vince, they were so young and impressionable. Vince was like fucking 12 years old. Like, or whatever, how, he was so young. And God, Amy was just a kid. I mean, it was crazy. So I think that so it was easier to sort of look upon them as like little brother and little sister, and take them under our wing, so to speak, and yeah, like have this little fam. And now it's like it's crazy. We go to each other's weddings, we see each other's babies get born, and it's really cool. I didn't see Amy's baby get born, but it's cool to be following each other's lives in that way.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially when you think about like the project that Felicia in particular has been involved in. I mean, because she's so like, like front facing, and like I think pretty much anyone I know knows who Felicia is, but she is probably one of the most down to earth people that I've ever interacted with. And I think that
That's all
was
a facade. She's just a good actor. She's Yeah, she's a monster.
in private when no one's looking.
Yeah, in private. Yeah, exactly. It's like the best time to be a monster.
um and I also do want to talk a little bit about like effing funny and The Legend of Neil, because I think that was for me also something that was so surprising. I mean, the whole thought of like being sucked into a video game, that's certainly not the first time or only time that it's been done, but I think the
Sure.
way that it was done was so like great. Like it was hilarious. I loved every minute of it, and I think it's one of those things that like if you really love The Legend of Neil, like it's just everything to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it you know what like The Legend of Neil was just really there was no there's nobody telling me what to do, you know? We ended up selling the show to Comedy Central, but even then it wasn't on their like it did go on TV, but like at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it wasn't like through their normal executive like sort of filtering. They just were like, here's this to them meager nothing amount of money. And then to us, it was like, oh my God. But it was still it was $10,000 an episode. I mean, we're talking like literally nothing. I mean, I shouldn't say literally nothing. That's $10,000. It's amazing. But at the like, I can't make a show for $10,000. Back then, I was full of naivety and I think which is like, by the way, the most powerful tool in your toolkit is how naive you can remain if you can remain in that beginner's mindset. Because nowadays I look at that budget, I'm like, how the hell did we do this? But yeah, it was just unbridled in terms of like being able to let loose our imagination and just be really silly, and anything that we were lacking in resources, we made up for in stupidity and resourcefulness. So it was like, oh, we can't film in a real cave, so let's just make cave walls out of like paper. Let's we can't afford amazing costumes and stuff, so let's just get this crappy like Santa Claus beard for the old man and like just show the seams and not try to blend it and like make it silly. And it just we just yeah, I don't know, it just kind of was driven by whatever tickled us the most at the time, being 20 something idiots. And so that was like, and I think for what it's worth, like it does all the comedy stand up? No, probably not. But I do think that like if you can appreciate that show, then like I know we'll be pals. Because it was so like exactly how my brain worked, and especially my brain in tandem with Tony, who played Neil. And it's like, yeah, if that show is gonna tickle you and capture your imagination, then I'm sure we'll be friends, because it's kind of my brain on display.
Yes,
Yeah,
which like I said, it was so great. Now going from that, I kind of want to talk about, well, we'll definitely get into Desiquest, but just kind of the D&D world in general, because I think how far D&D has come in,
yeah,
say the last five
it's amazing.
years really
Hmm.
lent itself to have a forum like this, because you've seen so much variety in, what kind of the main players have done on like Critical Role Dimension 20, in the scope of what you can do with a D&D game, that like people I think are more open to something other than what you may think of as the standard, what people have played as D&D for years. It can be so much more than that. And so when I saw the kind of initial stages of Desiquest and read about it, I mean, first, of course, I think the first thing I ever saw was you posting about it to kind of gauge interest and things like that. And I was like, huh, that seems really cool. And so I think what drew me in is because I am someone that, because I've experienced, some of that in my own right and in my life, representation is so important. And I know that being in generally a combat robotic space where traditionally there haven't been a lot of women. And I think if not for
Hmm.
seeing some women doing it, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
had the interest that I do in it. And I'm sure that, like, similarly, it's like, cool, there is an all Indian, Asian Pacific Islander cat doing D&D. And I think that
Hmm.
not only does it create that sense of representation for people that share that culture, but also for people who don't, who are like, this is really cool. I want to know more, and might change people's perspectives of like what they can expect from somebody who has that cultural background.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly the goal, was to well, I guess there's a couple goals. One was hey, let's create a world that felt authentic to our experience, even more specifically than just being South Asian, but I think also being first generation, or second generation, depending on how you label that, but sons and daughters of immigrants. And I think that was what really got me excited about it, was this concept that, if like I'm a dad now and I married a lovely white girl, but my son's only real path to his Indian roots is through me. Like the responsibility is on me to 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 sort of give breadcrumb him towards this ancient culture. And so it forced me to reckon with like, what is my relationship to Indian culture? And born and raised in New Hampshire, does not lend itself necessarily well to a really steeped traditions, though my parents are rather religious, and so I do have some connections to like Hinduism, and like and I've heard those stories growing up, but like those weren't the stories that I could relate with my other friends with, right? Like there was no opportunity to like to be on the playground pretending to be characters from the Mahabharata, right? Like we were pretending to be Superman or Transformers or Thundercats or whatever. So like that part of my attachment to that culture was like pretty well atrophied into my 40s, and now like that I have a kid and stuff. So like I was like, man, I better like really kind of figure this out for myself so that I can be really intentional, but with how I expose him to the culture. And so then this idea of doing Desiquest came about from Jasmine's brain, where she's like, I've always wanted to do an all South Asian table. And then I immediately was like, yes, that sounds perfect, because that sounds really accessible to me. And it sounds like a way that I can play like I would play on a playground as a kid with these characters, but I can play with these, these adults and other South Asians in a universe and in a storyverse that's like familiar to me, but the one that I don't know all that well either. So it was like both to represent South Asians at the table and playing in a mythological fantastical world, so that it'd be appealing to other South Asians out there who feel like they don't have a connection to play and teach RPG. That was absolutely a motivation, but it was also an invitation to the table for anyone else who's not South Asian to like be able to play in an authentically created space and come to the table as well. So that's why it was important to us. Like a lot of people, we got some comments here and there about like the guests that we brought to the table not being South Asian, and I was like, that was exactly the purpose. It wasn't just because like, oh, we were trying to get a big name or whatever, because Eric Ishii and Luis and Persephone are awesome names in the space, but it was like, that's not why we chose them. It was like we chose them intentionally because we wanted to show that everyone's welcome at this table, and like, because that's the experience that I have in Indian cultural programs or South Asian cultural programs, is this, hey, you're going to come to this wedding. Like, I don't care who you are, like wear the saris, wear the stuff, like, let's go. A swarm of aunties are going to come around you and like want to dress you and want you to be involved. And that's the energy that we wanted to make sure, kind of came off the screen. So that was the intent. That was the purpose. I mean, beyond also just like, let's have a great time together, and have fun together. That's also a very rare opportunity to sit at a table or be on a cast of all South Asians. I'd never done it before. I mean, mostly my interactions with other, South Asian talent or actors and stuff is sitting in a audition space with like 50 other yous trying to get on, this episode of Community, right? For the one slot that's there. Like, so we were always like, I don't think necessarily intentionally, but we were always pitted against each other versus being in a collaborative space together. And there's Christine, there's still this mentality out here to this day, 2024, where I will meet like a man, or send my materials to an agent or manager or something like that, because I recently switched representation, and some of the feedback I'll get back is like, well, I'm sorry, I already rep this Indian guy, so I love his materials, but I got one, you know. And they may not say that out like right like that, but that's basically what they're saying. They'll literally be like, yeah, I won't name names, but whatever, Kumail's on my roster. And you're just like, okay, and like, to me, it should be an opportunity to be like, hey, why don't you introduce us to other South Asian people on your roster? Like, instead of seeing it as like, well, I've got one and I have to service that one for the jobs that only are open to those for the one slot on these shows. It's like, how can I foster community, and how can I create a rising tide for people that are traditionally underrepresented, to collaborate? It's so yeah, it's crazy. Still got to fight that fight, no matter what the date is, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, I love to see, we talked about it a little bit before the interview, but your fellow castmate in Desiquest doing a show like Ms. Marvel, which I think is just so great. I mean, I loved it. My daughter loved it. And I love to see that out there as like a superhero that kids can look up to, and in like a type of role that you wouldn't have traditionally seen somebody of that culture in. And I love it so much.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because the South Asian diaspora is one of the largest in the world. It's one of the most wealthy in the world. It's one of the most successful in the world. And yet it's still really incredibly underrepresented in Hollywood media. I think there's a bunch of reasons, I think, why. First of all, probably is that there is Bollywood and Tollywood and Collywood, which exist in India, so it has its own, in a certain extent, has its own, avenue to tell South Asian stories, but it doesn't but that doesn't quite it isn't quite inclusive necessarily of people first generation, like immigrants, and or sons and daughters of immigrants, because, like, you know so those roles, or those depictions, tend to be more the side characters in Hollywood films, and Hollywood stories, right? And don't you know they end up being somewhat, caricatures, or I don't know, caricatures, but like, because there are some really good roles and stuff that I've seen, right? Good representations that I've seen, but they end up being sort of tokenized. Um, and at least that's some representation. And then, like, Mindy Kaling comes along and she's making stuff, and that's great too. But it's also just like, that's one voice, that's one perspective. Like, there's so many, like, this, the subcontinent is huge, and super. That was the other thing that we wanted to show, is like, my kind of like subversive secret goal is that people will start viewing India and Pakistan and that whole area, instead of just this like monolithic space, as like more like Europe. Like, India, every state has a different, cuisine. It has different language, has many different languages within them, has different culture, different types of clothes, different, like, just totally different vibes between them. I mean, like if you compared Kerala to Rajasthan, these are two different states in India. That's like saying, like, that'd be like, oh, Spain and Greece are exactly the same. Like, they're not. Like, when you think of Spain, you think of Greece, you think of very different things. You have all this context to fill your head for, this is what Spain feels like, or what I've seen depicted about Spain. If I say Tamil Nadu, like, you're just like, I don't know. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's in India. Then you're like, oh, okay, here's all the Indian stuff in my brain. But you don't segment out, like, this is what, like, Tamil Nadu culture is, right? And so, like, what was cool at Desiquest was having 5 of us together from different parts of India. Like, Rekha's South Indian, and I mean, me and Anjali are both Gujarati, so that there's some repetition there. But, like, Jasmine is Punjabi and Pakistani, and Omar is also half Pakistani. and I think the other half of it. I mean, I know it's Indian, but I'm trying to remember where. Anyway, but there's some more diversity there, and we hope to do more and bring in even more.
Yeah, was that kind of intentional as far as when the cast came together, as far as who you would include? I mean, I there's no question to be about any of these people being included because I think they're all fantastic. I mean,
Yeah,
I got the pleasure of meeting everybody at Gen Con last year, and they were just amazing. Like being in that space, I felt very transported just with everything, and I thought it was amazing. But I'm just curious how like
yeah.
the cast came together in the first place.
It started with like who is in this space, and who has some credibility in this space, and who have we worked with before that we've enjoyed working with before. It kind of started there. Like we weren't going around going like we need a South Indian, and so we're only get like because we didn't want to be victims of our own tokenization or like perpetrate that, or perpetuate that. So like I think it really did come from relationships. Also, we had no money or backing or anything like yet. When we were just kind of starting out, it was just a brainchild really, that Jasmine had and that we at F and Funny just said yes to. And just so we just started going through our Rolodexes and listing out folks that we really thought would be perfect for this. I think Anjali was at the top of that list. I mean, we had both worked with Anjali before. She has a ton of credibility in the space. She's incredible. So it was like, okay, we gotta lock Anjali in. And that was an easy ask for me because I directed her in Wizard School Dropout, which was a show that I made. And so that was cool. And she was immediately like all yeses. Her and Jasmine had been talking about it for even years before Jasmine approached me about it. So she was already like excited about the concept. And then eventually she came on as an executive producer as well. And so from there it became all right, well, let's flesh out this cast. We all know and love Reka, but I actually didn't know her. I just knew of her. And so then I reached out to, again, this is all about like this is what like being here is all about, right? Like it's about building that community. So I was a degree of separation away from her. I'm really good friends with Sam Reich, who runs College Humor and Dropout. And I was like, Sam, please introduce me to Reka. So he did, and then Reka and I had a coffee, and I pitched her the whole thing, and she was like, I'm in, and same thing with Omar. Like Omar had done stuff with Vince Casso from the Guild. And so I just reached out to Vince and was like, hey, dude, can you get me like, Omar's number basically? And so that's what it boiled down to, was just, friends and networks and stuff like that. And it was nice though. I will say there was some intention behind it. Like after we booked Anjali, it was like, okay, we do have two Gujaratis. So let's be considerate of like trying to get more perspectives. Without again trying to like tokenize anything. So that all just sort of came together. And then like when we finally had our first session 0, it was like, oh, this is going to be magical. And that was immediately apparent.
Yeah, I really did think that it was like I said, it was a magical thing. I mean, even from conception to like execution, I think that it was great. And I'm also curious just about another thing, like kind of as an offshoot to that, because one of the big things that you offered as a way to like raise money for Desiquest and kind of how we ended up meeting, was offering these D&D sessions for just fans who wanted to kind of get involved with the cast
Yeah.
and connect with the cast. And
Yeah.
I had not really seen that done prior to that. And I thought that was just an amazing opportunity. I'm very glad that I took advantage of it because I'm not a very experienced D&D player. And to be honest, like I was very intimidated, but when I kind of got into the session myself, I felt so welcomed. And like you talk about community a lot, and I think that's such an important aspect of what you've been able to build because that session was amazing. I came away from it feeling awesome. And I think, the
Oh, yay.
story that like Omar was able to craft was just great.
Yeah. I mean, he's brilliant. And that's what I think is that's why I think D&D is having its moment, honestly. It is this like perfect confluence of like um you know the kids who grew up playing D&D are finally like the adults with spending power. So there's that aspect, and it's like, hey, you know what? I'm tired of this nerd like now we own nerd as like, like with pride, but like I'm tired of being sort of like cast aside or like, being relegated to the darkest part of the lunchroom at school or whatever. Like no, like we're like we love this, and I think, and we want to be proud of our joy from it, that it brought us. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also just like, well, what are you doing when you're playing D&D? You're basically telling you're doing group storytelling on the fly, and it's such a magical experience when it comes together. I grew up, or I sort of cut my teeth out in LA as a performer doing improv, and it's very similar in that sense. Like, man, when you guys are all, when your crew, when your party, or your improv team, is all seeing the same thing, that's a really special experience. Suddenly, you guys have created an imaginary space that you are all collectively like seeing together. Like that is really cool. And then in those moments where you're really seeing it together and you're really like, alley-ooping each other, in whether it's in combat or whether it's just through great scene work or really great character exploration, and you really feel like you're bouncing and you're building together, like, man, is there any better of a feeling? And the thing is, the truth is that you can do, like, you don't need all this great expertise, or 20 years of, D&D experience to jump in and tell a story in a group with other people. Like, you don't, that is not a required prerequisite. Like, all you need is to feel welcomed, I think, so that you can feel safe to explore ideas, and know that you're not going to just be like put down, because it's a very vulnerable thing to be out there and going like, here, I have this really wild character idea. I really hope you guys don't make fun of me for it, and that, you embrace it. And so that, like, you have to have that foundation of safety, I think, and inclusion to have a good time, for any of you to have a good time. And so that's like the basis. That's like the baseline. And then what I've noticed is that, oh wow, as good as Jasmine is, as good as Omar is, and all these players are, it doesn't really require, again, like the best players in the world to have a great game. Like, I can just hang out with it. Like, every single one of those Play with the Pros games that we do have been so fun. I mean, seriously, we have not had a dud yet. And I think it's people coming in with that energy, that cooperative energy of wanting to, let's build a world together, and make these next 3 hours really magical, and explore each other's character arcs and story arcs, in a very giving way. And when that happens, man, it's like, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. So I think that's sort of like what's happening in terms of like D&D having its moment. Is it's like people just want real, like, we love stories, we love our, exploring our imaginations, we love working things out, our anxieties out in a story world, in a story universe, and to be able to do that together, collaboratively, in a world that can feel ever more isolating for a whole bunch of other reasons. And it is a very special experience, and so I'm not surprised that people are really seeking it out more and more.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the growth in popularity has been insane. I think that that's due to, a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, and I think that it's wonderful, and it's really, to me, one of the most inclusive spaces, just generally speaking. I mean, I don't think that I've seen a show or like witnessed a table or anything like that where that wasn't a huge part of what was going on in the game. So I
Yeah.
think that that's so important.
Christine, Omar and I did this thing we went to this, like, we got a job at producing this growth marketing summit in Silicon Valley in Park City with a bunch of tech bros. Okay. And so this is just like sometimes you just got to get a job, man. You know, like sometimes you just got to. And this, by the way, was another way to meet a bunch of very wealthy South Asians that did well for themselves in the tech space. So it was cool. And we're like, hey, you know what? Not only are we going to do your videography, but we're going to run a D&D game for you tech bros. And we did. And man, like the beginning of it was real choppy. The beginning of it was real choppy. Everybody came in with their like tech bro personality, and was kind of like, what is this? You know, like with this a little bit of like, oh wait, so you want me to be an elf? Like what? You know, that was like, and then because Omar is Omar, he set the whole thing in like like almost a Silicon Valley like setting, like where they were like they were doing it was like a team building conference for this like company basically, but with like in the world of D&D. So it's very clever that he did that, because then they all of a sudden had all these things to draw upon in their real life experience, and they started all riffing with each other on all the like the worst, most annoying team building things that they ever did. And by the end of it, they were like, you know, fighting like a you know, a surprise beholder like together. And it was just so great to watch the evolution of them, to like see them literally take off, you know, all the armor. They just had all this armor of like cool built up, and they just like finally took it all off, and they were just like, yeah, we are these characters and we're gotta beat this beholder together, and we're this team. And it was like, it was great. So by the end of it, they were all just like, when's the next one? Like literally to a number, they were all like, when do we get to do this again? That was so fun. So yeah, it's great. It's great. I genuinely think if we forced, you know, uh if we forced Congress to play D&D together, if we forced Israelis and Palestinians to play D&D together, I really think it would be really healing to force people from different walks of life to sit at a table together and create a story and fight a beholder. And I think there would be more harmony in this world.
It's so funny because as you were talking before, I was thinking something very similar. I'm like, I think everybody should do it just once. And I think that it's such a transformative process, and it teaches you so much about yourself, and so
Totally.
much about how you can make connections with other people that you don't even
Mhm.
know. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
recommend it to everyone.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. It's awesome.
Now, since we've kind of done the Desiquest, and that's been produced and everything, what's next for you at this point?
You know, I try to so I have a great team in the F and Funny squad. Um, my business partner Anand, and then Kaylin, who's our coordinator, and also like an amazing comedian herself, and then Omar and Sean, who's creating the show Wikipedia D&D, which is a D&D show set in the world where Wikipedia has come to life. It's really which is the world, so it's very meta. It's crazy and it's super fun. But so we produce a bunch of shows. We sort of use Twitch as like an experimenting ground for formats and ideas that we have. And so Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord community is really where we like connect with fans. And our mission is to make you fans the only people that we have to answer to. Like that is my mission. Is let's cut out these studio executives that think they know, everything about storytelling, when in my opinion they know just as much as anybody else who's watched 10,000 hours of shows, and like just go direct to our fans and sort of, obviously I'll be coming in with my concepts and my ideas and the things that that turn me on and I love, but I can go to my fans and more in more of a collaborative spirit to then kind of suss out like, hey, is this concept going to really resonate with my community? And then green light shows that way. And hopefully fun shows that way as well. And if we're able to do that, then we're able to just to make more Desiquests and Legend of Neils and the guilds, and the stuff that I think really turns us on, and less of the like, oh, we have to reboot, GoBots or something. which, could be cool, I guess. But like, it just, we can actually sort of access our, real imaginations without sort of sullying it with you know, the, 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 the corporate greedy parts as much.
I
So
couldn't
what's
agree
next? I don't
more.
know if that really answers what's next. I have a bunch of projects that I'm super excited about. Um, I guess, and all this stuff I'm in development with my community. So for example, thanks to working with Reka on this, Reka and I are working on a movie together, a movie that she wrote that she wants to star in, that I think is phenomenal and that I'm attached to direct. And so that I've been like sort of allowing the fans behind the scenes of the process of trying to get that movie made. It's a really challenging time to be making a movie, but I think this movie is very, very special. And I think this movie, would absolutely put Reka more, in the place where I think she deserves to be as a hilarious, leading person. And she showcased that she's got stories to tell and that and her unique voice. And so that's, you know, um, so that's been really cool because we've been doing these like movie club nights where like the movies that I would watch to research anyway, I've been doing it with the community and then like breaking the films down with them, and sort of giving the perspective of, hey, this is what I'm pulling from this film. These are the shots that really have impressed me. This is what I need to do more research on. This is what I'm, inspired by, or these are the things that I don't want to do, or whatever it is, like kind of really engaging in that way so that people can kind of, if they're interested in filmmaking, like this is a peek behind the curtains kind of a thing. So that's an example of like a project that I love that we're gonna have to go out and hunt for financing for, but one that we are, I'm just trying to open up the process behind so that, we can engage our fan base or, at an earlier stage and, hopefully get to a good place if we decide to run a Kickstarter and stuff like that, then the community's already greenlit this concept with us is the hope. So
Yeah, it sounds great. Now for the folks that are watching, where can they find you and find your stuff on the internets and the socials if they wish to do so?
we're everywhere, hopefully, that you want to be. And if we're not somewhere, then let us know. Because that's our thing. So F and Funny is my production company, and is the community. So F and Funny, EFFIN Funny. You find us on Discord, on any of the socials, on YouTube for sure, and Twitch. And then any of my personal socials are at Sandeep Parikh. If you could spell it, you deserve to follow me. So yeah, I have most of those socials. I'm on Instagram quite a bit, making sketches and doing a bunch of stand-up and stuff goes up there as well. So if you're interested in that, love to hear from you. And yeah, I think those are the main spots.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody does check out what you've got going on. But I so appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this stuff because I think that it's amazing and more people need to know about it. So for those that are watching this, please make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, interact, all of that good stuff, so that we can continue to build this community. And thank you so much, Sandeep, for joining on the show.
Yeah, it's really cool that you're also building a community, a community for the thing that you love for, combat robotics. Like, yeah, like that's the beauty of what we have now, the power that we have, like a movie studio in our pockets to like create content, and that could be really, niche and stuff. And then that people can connect and share their love of things together. I mean, we just need more of that stuff in the world, because there's a whole bunch of other negative crap that is seeking to bog us down. So just to anyone listening out there, if there's something that you're really passionate about, like find that community, create something from your heart, from your voice that, no one else can do. We have all the tools now, like there's nothing stopping you from making a video, getting something out there and then finding your people. That's my 2 cents. So thanks for having me, Christine. This is great.
I couldn't agree more. We'll see everybody next time on the show.